Hey, this is Colton Narabeski with Risa Press. Today we're bringing you an interview I did with Eliot Cowley the other day about his experience studying at Waseda University in Tokyo, his experience learning Japanese from America and then moving to Japan, and how that led to him getting his dream job in the video game industry at Sony. Leave your questions in the comments below.
Where should I start? I guess I'll start, from New York originally, went to school in New York as well, Vassar College, majored in Japanese. That's where I started learning for the first time. I hadn't done any like self-study or anything of Japanese before that. But yeah, I mean, in like a classroom setting, surrounded by other people learning Japanese, and having like an actual Japanese person teaching me was really awesome. So that was 2 years of classes with that. But my junior year studying abroad was like where it really like came together. And I realized like, I don't know anything.
Yeah, I had the exact same experience. You go there and you're like, oh, I've been studying for a couple of years, whatever. I feel pretty comfortable. I can kind of talk to friends and stuff. I'll be fine. And you get there and you're like, oh, this is the deep end.
Yeah, exactly. I was using watashi and people were looking at me weird, and like a lot of desmas, and people were like, dude, like, you don't have to be so polite. And so I learned very quickly, like, just more casual speaking with friends and stuff. And I would say that's where like my language skills like took a huge jump. So yeah, studied abroad at Waseda for a year, did like Japanese classes. I think it was like 4 or 5 days a week, usually for like 3 hours ish.
Oh my God,
a day.
Intense.
Yeah, it was a lot.
You said you majored in Japanese though too, right? So that's kind of a commitment to being the intense side of study for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And I figured like, I'm here in Japan, like I want to be able to like communicate with people and like live a regular life. So I figured it was good. Although I will say, and maybe you experienced this too, I was part of a circle, like a club in Tokyo at Waseda. It was the largest foreigner club. So it was like, it's called Niji no Kai, Meeting of the Rainbow. It's kind of like lots of people from different like cultures and countries and stuff, and trying to like just introduce each other to our respective cultures. So I met a lot of friends through that, but almost every week there was a nomikai. So a lot of like, and it'd be like a Wednesday too. So like, it'd be like, I have class the next day, but I'd still go.
Doesn't matter.
So that was, my life at Waseda for the most part. I spent a year there. Came back, didn't really study Japanese at all when I got back, because I had finished most of my major requirements, so there wasn't any need to, but I needed to finish my computer science degree, so I focused all on that. But yeah, I mean, definitely I could see a drop of like, coming back, you're not really surrounded by Japanese anymore, so.
No, it happens for sure. Like, my situation was studying at Sophia Joshi Daigaku for the year, and similar to you, I felt a huge jump in Japanese level. I was like, oh, this is great. I'm gonna retain this forever now. And came back, and I still had 2 years to go in university, and it took a complete cliff dive, basically. And so when Hitachi brought me on, they were very nice about it. They told me, oh, your Japanese is great. And I got the office the first day and realized it wasn't as great as I thought it was. And I was in for a big shock, especially like business Japanese. Did you ever run into a situation where you had to use Keigo and stuff?
Not really. We didn't do a lot of Keigo in class. We used mostly just like polite form. That actually my first run-in with Keigo, and you probably experienced this too, was like setting up a cell phone plan.
I'm sure it's most people's, that or the bank account. It's kind of like the chicken and egg thing.
Exactly. I literally, so I couldn't understand anything that they were saying. And I have my Japanese friend with me to try to like interpret, But like for some reason, just nothing was getting through, and they put me on the phone with somebody. And then, like,
no, I hate when they do that.
Yeah, and it's like I can understand even less on the phone, so it's like
no, it just got worse.
Yeah, so we just went round in circles for like half an hour.
Yeah, I've had the conversation before. It's like, you know, listen, I'm a foreigner. Obviously, you can see me. My keigo is not what it should be. Can we just speak in casual Japanese? And the person that's in front of me is like, "Hi, kashimarimashita." Like, no, we're already losing.
I know. I said the same thing. Like, casual is fine, and they're like, no, I'm not.
No, I can't. It's not in the book.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, that's cool. When you were at Waseda studying Japanese, you know, you said you did the 3 hours a day in class, and you also had, I guess, you know, your kind of Niji no Kai time with your other friends. What, from your perspective, what was the thing that kind of gave you the biggest boost of Japanese? Was it talking with friends? Was it the intense study time? Was it kind of the combination of the two? Like, you know, you're in class, like, oh, this is a cool grammar thing that I didn't know about. I'm going to go try that in 20 different places today. Was it kind of that type of thing?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, I did end up using a lot of the stuff that I learned in class. I would do a lot of like flashcards studying and stuff for tests. And I would like try to use those words in conversation with like my host family. I forgot to mention I stayed with the host family.
That is intense. Yeah, wow.
Yeah. So I would try to like drop like new words and stuff in conversation. One funny one was, I had learned the word gamanzuyoi, like very patient. And so my host's mom was like asking me to describe like in a word, like my host dad and my host mom. And I described my host mom as gamanzuyoi, and she was like, "Whoa, like I didn't think you knew that word. Like that's so funny." So
awesome.
Yeah, I would say like speaking with friends and like host family was like the biggest way that I advanced, just because I was using it constantly. But I was able to use like the stuff that I learned in class to try to like solidify that.
Yeah, it's kind of like that one too. Like you get that, you know, the textbook, like the bulk of what you need to know, but then you get all these cool opportunities to go use it in different contexts and stuff. And it really, I always found that it like solidified what you learned in class to actually be able to immediately go out and use it. And that was, for me, that was the big difference between studying Japanese in Canada and then studying Japanese in Japan, was the immediacy of like being able to go and try it and fail a lot of times. Like you try it out in public with a train station attendant or the waitress or whatever, and like, just laugh it off, it's okay.
Yeah, that's another thing. I'm like, I have no shame. So
yeah, that's exactly the key though. That's exactly the key.
It is. Like you have to be like totally okay with just like totally messing it up. And I'm fine with that. Like, I don't care if people laugh at me or whatever. But like, the thing is, people are so nice. Like they actually won't correct you a lot of the time. Like I found it was very difficult to like get people to actually correct me.
Yeah. So I get that with my wife today. I'm like, I know I'm saying things wrong in Japanese and she doesn't correct me. just tell me if I'm wrong. This is not going to get better if you don't.
Yeah. I guess like as long as the meaning is getting across, it's fine. But still, like that.
Well, that's cool. How's kanji for you?
Kanji, yeah, that's a big one. I guess like technically I started learning kanji in like my first couple of years of college. We would do like these fun kind of exercises where you'd split the class in two, and then like you'd each be lined up in a row, and you'd have to like draw kanji on each other's back to like, and then if you got it right, then the next person draws on the next person's back and stuff like that. But like it was helpful for like cramming like a couple of kanji, but in terms of like knowing, you know, 2200 or whatever kanji, like I did not like we would have so many, and in Japan, like in my classes we would have a lot of kanji tests and stuff, but it was like, you know, I'd memorize whatever I needed to for the test and then I'd just like forget it, you know.
That's exactly it. That's been my experience learning kanji for many years. I started in high school, then university. So like, you know, let's see, I'm 30 now, studying Japanese I guess for 17 years at this point, and it's like it's always just been, well, for the first half of it at least, was always a matter of like, I got a quiz coming up, okay, I'm gonna cram this, you know, block of 20 or 30 kanji and just get it for the quiz, and you do, but years later it doesn't stick with you. It's always the problem.
Yeah, that's the thing. So yeah, for me, it was like, I didn't know any kanji. I basically considered myself not to have known any kanji throughout college.
Yep.
I just say like, whatever. So I said, okay, like once I got a job after college and had a bit of free time, I'd be like, okay, like let's actually learn this for real. And then I tried researching different ways and found like Remembering the Kanji by James Hasig.
Yep.
Got his book, did the whole like, once I started like learning that everything's broken up into like little pieces and then each piece has a meaning and you can like make stories around that. That actually made it really fun because I had always hated kanji, but that actually made it fun to like make up stories and stuff. So I did that for like a year and a half, and now I would say I basically know most of the kanji. I can't read very well because it only teaches me the keywords.
Right.
But if I see a word that I don't know, and I recognize the kanji, then I can basically like get the meaning out of that. So call that a word.
Yeah, and I know that feeling too, especially when you're kind of at that like intermediate level. You look at it, you're like, I know that this generally means this thing, and so I can kind of skip over it in the sentence without thinking too much about it. And that's the issue with kanji, is it lets you understand without being fully literate.
Right.
Lets you breeze through things a little bit too fast.
Yeah, it's true. And like, I know this is bad, but I just don't do a lot of reading practice. I'm much more into like speaking and listening. So I do a lot of like, italki lessons and stuff, but like, I really need to like get on that reading practice, because I don't know, every once in a while I'll be like reading a passage to my teacher and then I'll come across a word that I really should know, but it's just like really embarrassing.
So are you still studying Japanese right now?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
yeah.
Very cool.
I'm trying to like get over that, like the plateau, like the intermediate plateau. I really want to get to a point of like competent, like at a business level. And maybe you're pretty familiar with that because you've worked at, Japanese companies and like have interacted in that environment. But like, I'd really love to get to that level. I've been like studying Keigo and stuff, and
it's a weird barrier to get past, because similar to, I guess, almost anything in Japanese or any language really for that matter, it's really you just need to try it, and the opportunities to use Keigo naturally don't really show up unless they're kind of like high stakes moments, like you're either in business or you are trying to sell something or whatever. So it's like your actual opportunity to use Keigo in real world context is so limited. Because you're not going to talk like that to a station attendant. You're not going to speak like that to your friends. And so your opportunities to be corrected really are only by working at a Japanese company and having a senpai or a boss or somebody who's going to like, no, we don't say it that way. Writing emails was the crazy thing for me. When I first started, it was like, so day one at Hitachi, they did two things. They gave me the department phone. They put that in front of my desk to answer, because that was a good choice for everybody, having the gaijin answer the phone. But then also I became like the tantosha on our side for a bunch of our vendors. So I was working in human resources, and so we had a bunch of vendors in different schools and different like recruiting avenues and stuff. And so I had to be writing back and forth emails with them all day. And at first, these emails are coming in, I'm going, oh my God, I don't know what this is. And at the same time, they were sending me to Japanese school. I can't remember if it was like 2 or 3 days a week for an afternoon or for a morning, whatever. And so I just went into the business Japanese class and we practiced writing emails. And once you get to the point of like understanding the patterns that exist in emails and stuff, it kind of starts to like really trickle into your whole Keigo speech with everybody. Like there's set phrases, those kimari monku that you always say and you always finish with. And if you say a bunch of them, kind of relatively fluently, everybody's like, oh yeah, okay, this guy's very polite. He's a nice guy, So that's kind of how I got over that. But it's not, I wouldn't say native level fluency by any means in business Japanese, just very like, I can get through a conversation. I've presented a little bit before with strict supervision. But it's a really weird one because, like I say, there's just so few opportunities to go and actually like try it until you're kind of in the fire. Yeah,
that's true. I'm lucky that I work at Sony right now. So I'm lucky to work at like a Japanese company, even if it's in like the American branch. So like a lot of my coworkers are Japanese. I'm on the documentation team, so we have like translators and stuff. So when we were going into the office, I would almost every morning I would have like a 10 or 15-minute conversation with like one of my Japanese coworkers, and like she's very patient, and like that was really good, like semi-Keigo practice. And I definitely like see like emails coming through in Japanese that like I don't need to respond to, unfortunately. Like if I needed to respond to them, then that would force me to like read and like write and stuff. But like
for sure,
once in a while, if I have time, I'll be like, oh, let's see if I can understand this and stuff.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. I've got to ask, so like you work at Sony now. Was that decision kind of predicated on you wanted to work for the Japanese company? Was it helpful that you studied at Waseda to be able to get the opportunity to work at Sony? Like, kind of, how did your experience in Japan and your experience studying Japanese tie with your career? Because it seems like it kind of fits a little bit.
Yeah. Kind of like one of the reasons why I wanted to work at Sony or like at any Japanese company was to kind of get back into that like Japanese mindset, because like my previous company was an American company, Microsoft, so like no Japanese at all really. And I was kind of missing that, and also like having future plans to eventually like live and work in Japan. I wanted to like work at a Japanese company to like potentially transfer over there at some point. So like that was kind of the calculus there. And then as for the job itself, it definitely doesn't require Japanese at all. But they were kind of like, well, it's like icing on the cake. And they even had me do like a 15-minute or so interview, like in Japanese with one of the translators.
How did that go?
Try to like, surprisingly well, actually. It was really hard to understand him because he had just like chipped a tooth. So like he was having trouble talking. But I think even then, it was decent enough for them to hire me, I guess.
That's cool. Was that your first interview in Japanese you'd ever taken?
No, before I went to Sony, I had been actually interviewing with companies overseas in Japan. Trying to think about like maybe landing something from abroad. And those were primarily in Japanese. So I'd kind of gotten used to like trying to use Keigo and like all that stuff.
Okay. Yeah, it's another aspect of Japanese. It's like really distinct and limited chances to use is like the interview process and the interview Japanese.
Yeah, for sure. I think though, like the gaijin card helps a lot because like they definitely they don't expect you at all really to like, at least me, they didn't really expect me to like be that good. So then when I displayed any kind of competency, they were like, oh, awesome.
It's always nice, right?
So
for sure.
Yeah, that's kind of the nice thing. But I want to get to the point where it's like I don't need to use that card. I can just be like normal fluency. So.
Yeah, that's kind of always been the yardstick that I measured it with too, is like, can I operate as an adult in this country, in this situation, without being like the child in the room, was kind of how I looked at it. And so, for what it's worth, I always end up being the child in the room, but that's how it is. So
what are you going to do?
That's cool. All right, so for self-study, quickly, what's been, do you think, the biggest, most effective thing that you've done for yourself, whether it was a course or a book you read or just a habit that you put into practice? What was the thing that kind of you think keeps things chugging along or put you at another level one time?
Yeah, I would say, and this isn't even like a Japanese thing, I would say just like consistency, because like, once I graduated college, like it was very hard because in college, like everything is planned out for you and like you go to class at these times and you have this homework and stuff.
Yeah.
But like once I graduated, just having like so much freedom to just determine how I spent my time was like pretty overwhelming. I enjoy having like structure. So I just set up like daily routines. Like every morning I will study, 5-10 new kanji or words or whatever. I've kind of like hopped around different books to try to find what I like. But yeah, really for me, it's just about like the consistent effort, whether I wanted to or not, whether I was motivated or not, just the fact that I did it in the like every morning, like that kind of set me up for just eventually building up enough knowledge to kind of keep moving. So
yeah. I think that's like, I read about that too a lot. I think consistency is key basically in anything you do in life. There's very few things you can do that are going to be successful where it's like a 3-day effort or a 1-week effort or something. It's almost like you're building a house and you just got to build it brick by brick by brick. And you know, language acquisition is absolutely that, because if you kind of like rush it and you sprint a little bit, yeah, you can cram for the quiz, but it's not going to be retained. And my periods of, I think, biggest Japanese language acquisition have always been, was like, okay, you know, these next 6 months, this next year is going to be really focused on getting to this level or doing this thing or whatever. And just like that continuous daily, you know, you end up with a stack of flashcards like that. And but it's evidence of like, you know, concerted long-term effort. So that's really cool. Have you ever do you ever buy courses online? Have you bought like books for yourself on Amazon going, oh, okay, that looks like that'd be a good tool, stuff like that?
Yeah, I buy books. I've got, so I would do like whatever research on like popular books and stuff. I bought Haysig's whole 3 books before I realized like, wait, volume 2 actually is not going to be very useful to me, so I'm going to skip that one. But
sure,
1 and 3 I think are good. And yeah, and like vocab is a big one for me. I have a lot of gaps in my vocab knowledge. I know a lot of the like casual, like, you know, conversation stuff, and a lot of like drinking terms, because we go on like nomikais and stuff a lot.
Yep.
But there's definitely huge gaps in my knowledge of just like basic words, and like you don't really realize it until you're like, you know, in a lesson and struggling to come up with the word, and you're just like, wow, I should really know that. So I like I've been narrowing my vocab studies to like specific like N2, N3 levels of JLPT. But I think I'm almost done with that basically. And I think after that I want to start doing like reading more like actual books, and just like, you know, whatever vocab that I don't know, I'll just like note down. Because like, you know, when I started, like I would open a book and I would not be able to read, like it'd be like every sentence would be like 5 words I don't know, which is just like not fun.
It's a painful process. Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah. So I think like having that base of like solid vocab will help, and then take that and start maybe read like Harry Potter or something.
Cool, man. No, that's an awesome goal. Is there anything that you think, like, you know, if somebody listening to this or watching this on YouTube were to say, okay, I'm studying Japanese, what's something that I shouldn't do? What's a mistake maybe that you've made in your experience studying Japanese or living in Japan or something? Just maybe 1 or 2 kind of don't do this.
Yeah. I guess this is kind of a dumb one, but like, don't be afraid to make mistakes, because like, you know, like I said, like having no shame is a real asset here, because like,
yes, it is.
if you're constantly worried like, oh, I gotta, you know, be perfect, then you'll just never try. And like I've read stuff about like, oh, you need to like, you know, have a certain amount of input before you can do any output. And like, I think that's valid, but like for me, what's helped a lot was like actually conversing with people and like trying to use, I mean, definitely like, you know, listening to them, but like trying to use what I learned would be very helpful for me to like strengthen those muscles and like kind of identify gaps and stuff. So yeah, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Just be shameless.
Awesome. Tell me about your Onomatopoeia Quest game. I saw that you had produced this kind of game, and it was for Windows, and I'm on a Mac, unfortunately, so I was unable to do that. But tell me about it. It looks really interesting from the screenshots I saw.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. So you're the first person I think outside of my like major advisor and like some friends that has remarked on it. So that's very kind. Yeah, it's basically, so that was my senior project at college. For my majors, I didn't need to do, so I majored in Japanese and computer science. I didn't need to do a thesis for either of them. So it was optional, but you could do like a project kind of thing. So like not strictly like an essay or whatever. So I decided like, why don't we combine them, make a video game that kind of teaches you Japanese. And I talked to my Japanese advisor, and she was like, why don't you narrow it down to like something small like onomatopoeia, where you have like, you know, a small enough set that you can actually like teach. So that's kind of where it came out of. And I wanted it to be like a game first that like also teaches you stuff. So instead of being, I mean, I played a lot of like Reader Rabbit and stuff growing up, which is great, but like, you know, I wanted to make like an RPG, a JRPG that would be fun, but then also like would teach you words. So
that's awesome, man.
It basically, you like unlock onomatopoeia words that can give you like certain skills. I think one was like iso, which is like going really fast, makes you like super speed. Some other ones. It ended up being like just a prototype because I didn't realize how much work it was going to be to make. So it's very small. But yeah, I mean, it was a lot of fun to make, to try to like combine my interests. So
that's awesome. Yeah, no, I think the gamification of, you know, knowledge acquisition, and when you talk about adult learning and how we retain things, it has to be something that you're going to want to do. Like the Reader Rabbit thing that you're talking about. Like, even as a kid, you know that that's education. You know that somebody's trying to teach you something, and you know, kind of, you get to a certain point where you're like, I don't want to do that. That's not fun, right? And so, like when you're doing self-study and stuff, it's always like, okay, well, you know, your enjoyment, your dopamine is coming from like, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to be able to talk to these people. I'm going to date that girl. You know, like there's always something that you're going to get out of it, a gratification piece. But if you can gamify that in the learning process, it's so effective. That's really, really cool.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, think about like Assassin's Creed, right? Like that franchise has gotten so popular, and like it's very like they pride themselves on being like as historically, not like super historically accurate, obviously, but like there was one that was set in Egypt, and like it had a special mode. I think it was like museum mode or something, where like
very cool.
You could literally like just like look around like the scenery and like, you know, read about the different, you know, pyramids and whatnot.
Wow.
And like, you know, all the kids growing up like learning about that stuff without even realizing it's like education is like pretty awesome.
That's it. That's exactly it. Very cool, man. Well, listen, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate that. And yeah, you know, when you launch Onomatopoeia Quest on a proper platform, let us know.
Yeah, I'll put it on Steam at some point. That would be great.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Cool. Well, yeah, thanks very much for having me on. I really appreciate it.